Still on now? Okay. We finished Daniel chapter 7-ish last week, talking about the four beasts. We didn't really get into the little horn, because we'll get more into the little horn as Daniel goes on. But any questions from last week? All right, then we will start off with Daniel chapter 8. If you weren't confused already, you're in luck, because there's more. So Daniel chapter 8, in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar. Daniel chapter 7, when did it start? First year. So 2 years have passed. A vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. So Daniel's telling you for sure this is my second vision under King Belshazzar. And I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. Anybody know where that's at? Where's Daniel now in Babylon? In modern days? Iraq. Yeah, it's the actual capital was really close to where Baghdad is today. Now they own that whole area. So Susa, the citadel, is in Iran, about 200 miles from Baghdad. But Daniel's actually still in Babylon. You will read that later in the end of chapter 8 when he comes up from his sickness and goes back to the king's work. The king's work is in Babylon. So he's in Babylon, but in the vision, he's taken to Susa, the citadel in the province of Elam. Now at this time, who is the power in Iran? The Persians. So this is the Medo-Persian. And I was at the Ulai Canal. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had 2 horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. So when he starts to give you all these specific details, take note, because every single one means something. And that's what you have to figure out if you're going to try to interpret prophecy. Because if he just wanted to tell you it was a ram, he's just going to tell you a ram. He's not going to tell you it has 2 horns. He's not going to tell you one's taller than the other. He's not going to tell you the taller one came up last. Those are all clues into what he's talking about. I saw a ram charging westward, northward, and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and he became great. So, in his visions, when we see these beasts or these animals, what are they? Kingdoms. Which kingdom does this sound like when he describes it as having 2 horns and one greater than the other horn? We just studied last week. What empire? Not Roman. Not Nebuchadnezzar. Not Alexander the Great. Okay, so we got one left. The Medes and the Persians, right? 2 joined together. One was stronger than, greater than the other, just like the bear raised up on one side. So it's the Medo-Persian Empire. How do we know that? Scroll down to, I think it's verse 20. Because we don't have to guess at this one. But if you can figure it out without reading verse 20, it helps you to start to interpret Scripture. Verse 20 says, as for the ram that you saw with two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. So Gabriel tells him later exactly which kingdom that is. You'll read the next verse, but don't read it yet, because it says Greece, but that's not actually what the word is, but we'll get to that later. As I was considering, behold, a male goat from the west. So you're in Iran, and we're going westward. A male goat from the west came across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. He came to the ram with two horns, which I saw standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and struck the ram and broke his two horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him. But he cast down to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Then the goat became exceedingly great. So the Medes and Persians were great. This next empire is exceedingly great. Like I said, when you notice changes, mark them because he's telling you something. But when he became strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up four conspicuous horns towards the four winds of heaven. So if the ram is an animal, is a kingdom, is Medo-Persia, what's the goat? It is another kingdom, the kingdom of Greece. But in Daniel's time, there is no such thing as the kingdom of Greece. In Daniel's time, there is the Medo-Persian Empire. The Grecian Empire has not yet started. They're just tribes. One horn, so you picture a unicorn goat. One horn out of the middle of its eye. That horn we always point to Alexander the Great. So when it says he moved from the west to the east, where was the Grecian Empire started? I know you're all going to say Greece. But no, partially. But we don't have to guess at this one either. Scroll down to verse 21. The angel Gabriel interprets it. And the goat is the kingdom of, and I said it says Greece, but the actual word there is not Greece, it's Yevon. Because like I said, there was no Grecian Empire at this time. And I wish they would have kept it Yevon, because it helps the area, helps put your mind in the area better. When you think of Greece, do you think of the Middle East? No, you think of Europe, because that's the Greek islands. That's not the main place they were. Think modern day Turkey. All the way along the Mediterranean was the Grecian Empire. It was very heavy in Turkey, what we would call Turkey today. So this would have been Yevon. When it started out, it was here in the Grecian islands. And then it started to spread. So when I tell you all Bible prophecy has to do with the Middle East, by calling it Greece, we start to think of Europe. I wish they should have just left it Yevon, because then we would have known it was Asia Minor. When the New Testament's written, and the book of Acts is written, where's the place they go to? Ephesus, Thyatira, all those, Asia Minor, Turkey, Middle East. So let's go back and we'll read the rest, and then we can start breaking it down. Out of one of the, so the great horn was broken, and instead of it came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land. When Daniel says glorious land, he's talking about what land? Israel. I heard somebody say it. Israel. The glorious land's always Israel. So you get an idea of where the little horn's going to come up, because he's going to move southward, he's going to move eastward, and he's going to move towards Israel. He is who? Who's the little horn? The Antichrist. Okay. Well, you're making me jump forward. If we're talking about the Grecian Empire, does that mean the Antichrist came? Because the little horn's coming out of the Grecian Empire. Yeah, there's many little a Antichrist and then one capital A, the Antichrist. It grew even to the hosts of heaven. Who's the host of heaven? When the Bible talks about the host of heaven, angels. They are heavenly hosts, hosts of heaven. So it grew great even to the host of heaven, and some of the hosts and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. We get that explained much better in another book of the Bible. But what would be the stars of heaven that were cast down? Fallen angels. A third of them fell with Lucifer. And in the book of Revelation tells us there's a point where they're cast out of heaven down to the earth, and woe to the earth, because Satan and his angels are there and they know their time is limited. So you see at this point, I'm jumping out of character, out of the scripture, but we're no longer talking about Greece. It started with Greece, but now we're talking about something that is clearly has not happened. It's futuristic. It became great, even as great as the prince of the hosts. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. And a host will be given over to it, together with the regular burnt offerings, because of transgressions, and it will be thrown to the ground, and it will act and prosper. I'm probably the only one who finds that funny, but I was listening to a guy talk about Daniel chapter 8 this week, and he said, I often get asked if I believe in the prosperity gospel, and he says, yes, I do, just like Daniel chapter 8. Who is going to prosper? Not Christians. Satan prospers, killing Christians. So yes, I believe in the no, but it cracked me up. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, for how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering? For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate? What's another phrase for transgression that makes desolate? Because it's going to pop up several times. The abomination of desolation. It's going to continue to be a theme through Daniel, through Matthew, and through Revelation. And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be restored to its rightful state. When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it, and behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened, and I fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, that the vision is meant for when? For the time of the end. So this is why prophecy is so complicated. Because now he's going to go on and tell us, well, I'll read. And when he had spoken to me, I fell in a deep sleep with my face on the ground. Then he touched me and made me stand. He said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation. For it refers to the appointed time of the end. So, we have any Bible scholars? What's the appointed time of the end? It goes by many names throughout the Bible. Second coming of Christ. Anybody hear Jacob's troubles? The hour of the wrath of God. The year of recompense. The 7-year tribulation. The 7-year tribulation. The great tribulation, the 3.5 years. It's when the wrath of God finally gets poured out. So when you see Jacob's troubles or time of indignation or Jacob's sorrows or the one you guys all know it as is the tribulation and the great tribulation, which are two different time periods. So again, he's telling us the appointed time of the end, the time of indignation. As for the ram you saw with 2 horns, these are the kings of Media, Persia. And the goat is the king of Yavon. And the great horn between his eyes is the first king. As for the horn that was broken, in its place of which 4 others arose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. And at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressions has reached a limit, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own power. And he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty people, and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand. And in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken, but by no human hand. The vision of the evenings and the mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. And I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. And then I arose and went about the king's business. But I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. So you're in good company if you don't understand prophecy. Because here's Daniel who's given insight into visions and dreams, and he struggles to understand what we're talking about. Daniel 8. All right. So, Daniel chapter 2, we have the statue we've gone over 100 times. Daniel chapter 7, we have the beasts. Now we get added in the ram and the goat. First kingdom, Babylon. Second kingdom, Medo-Persia. Third kingdom, Greece. Fourth kingdom, to come. This graphic says Rome. I don't think it's Rome, but we already know that. And then the final kingdom, the feet of the statue. 10 rulers, and you'll see that repeated a lot. 10 toes on the statue, 10 horns on the beast, 10 heads, 10, 10, 10. So in the end, there's 10-ish, then 11. So, we said Greek was Alexander, right? So you had the Medo-Persians, the ram with 2 horns, one's bigger than the other. You had the Greek. Greek attacks it. Then you have this changing of the Grecian Empire. The one horn gets broken off. So what happens to Alexander Great at age 33? He dies, yeah. It actually records before that he's weeping uncontrollably because he has no more lands to conquer. He was 21 when he started his campaign. And it talks about he's enraged against the ram. He really was. He was mad about 150 years earlier when the Medo-Persians went into Greek, and you've seen all these movies, Spartans, 300, and all that stuff. That's that time period. He's 150 years removed, and he's so angry that they attacked back then that that's why he goes and conquers the whole known world over to China. Wipes it out in 12 years. So when you see the leopard with the 4 wings, the leopard's already fast. Let's add wings to make it even quicker. And then you have this goat that doesn't touch the ground as it moves across it because it's going so rapidly. His conquest was quick. He attacked the Medo-Persian army, and don't quote me on numbers, but they had somewhere around 1 million people, and he had somewhere around 30,000, and he destroyed them like they were nothing when he came against them. So when it talks about he charged them and broke them and trampled those under his feet, Alexander fits perfectly. But then Alexander dies, and we get 4. And this is where I struggle, but we're going to go with it because I don't have a better answer. 4 kingdoms come out of it. 4, the best way I can do it is say families. You had Ptolemy, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Cassandra families, dynasties. One of them split. I can't remember which one, but there was another king, and I forget his name, starts with an A, but they called him the One Eye. He was actually rather fascinating. If I can remember his name, I'd tell you to read a book on him. But he was 20 years older than all these other 4 generals and ran circles around them. They finally killed him when he's 80, and it settled down to these 4 for a short period of time, then broke into 20-some different ones after that. But mostly 4 families, because the One Eye was in one of these families. Divided up the kingdom when Alexander died. Now, Alexander's wife was pregnant at the time, and Alexander had a brother at the time of his death. But his brother, for lack of better words, was mentally short. He was either mentally handicapped or he was just not real bright. History's not real clear, but I think mentally handicapped. So they weren't going to give the kingdom to the brother. His wife was pregnant. They didn't know if it was a boy. So they divided it up and figured if it was a boy, if he was old enough to give it back. I didn't read any further than that because it never goes to him. The kingdom breaks up into 4 groups that fight amongst each other. Now out of the Seleucus comes a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes comes around 175 BC to his power. He was a bad dude. He shouldn't even have been king. His brother was king. He betrayed his brother, gave his brother off as offering to somebody else, assumed the throne. Bad dude. And he hated the Jewish people. Hated them. So he goes to attack Egypt, and you'll read about this other places in the Bible because it brings it up. But in Daniel, actually. But he goes to attack one of his compadres to take over their land in Egypt, and he loses. And he goes back up and he attacks Israel. He kills 40,000 and deports 40,000 into slavery, and he goes back. And then he goes back down with a bigger army to attack his compadre. At this point, Rome's there with all of its ships, and it's protecting that other one. Rome comes onto the picture. So he gets really mad. And he goes back up and he attacks Israel again. Only this time he does the unthinkable. He kills and he sends them all out, and he desecrates the temple. He takes a pig and sacrifices it on the altar, on God's altar. He takes a statue of Zeus and puts it up inside the temple. So when you hear abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, when Jesus talks about this in Matthew 24, this is what Daniel's talking about, or Jesus is talking about what's happening here. And Daniel starts to explain. If you've ever read Maccabees, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, they're not in our Bible, they're in the Catholic Bible, but they are great historical books. And it's all about the Maccabean revolt that comes from Antiochus Epiphanes, desecrating the temple. And if you've heard about Hanukkah, Hanukkah comes from this same period of time. It was when they restored the temple and rededicated it in the 12 days, and oil that should only lasted a day lasted 12 days, and the celebration of cleansing. All comes from Antiochus Epiphanes' time. He is an Antichrist. He's the closest type to the Antichrist that we get in all of Scripture. But obviously he's not the Antichrist. Why? Did the angels get cast down to heaven? Did the statue get collapsed and the kingdom of get set up? And no. So we're not there yet. So at some point in Daniel chapter 8, we switch from this historical for us. Now remember, it's still future for Daniel. All this stuff is still hundreds of years of from happening for Daniel. Not Medo-Persia taking over Babylon. That's in his very near future. But they have a couple 100-year lifespan before Greece takes them over, and then Greece has a 150, 200-year lifespan before Rome takes them over. So those are history for us, but they're future for when Daniel's being told. So Antiochus Epiphanes, I believe, is talked about in Daniel chapter 8, just as what to look for when it comes to the Antichrist. Because he's going to do a lot of what he did. He's going to desecrate the temple. So Daniel chapter 8 adds 2 more figures, a little more explanation, but not a whole lot of depth. Before we jump into the deeper, harder stuff, questions? I know you have them, you just must be afraid to ask them. Yes. Yeah, Antiochus Epiphanes did not tear it down, he just desecrated it. He put a false god statue inside and did the unthinkable, because a pig is an unclean animal, and sacrificed it on God's holy altar. So yeah, they had to go through and cleanse the whole temple. Yeah. He burned every scroll of the Old Testament up until Daniel's, up until Antiochus' time. Uh-huh. It says so in Daniel chapter 8. Let's read. Why does he let it? Oh, don't click. Behold, I will make known to you what shall happen at the latter end of the indignation. Israel sins again, rebels again, starts following after other stuff, and God allows punishment to come. Indignation, their sins. That's why God allows all of it to happen, because we choose it by disobeying. So what makes this so difficult? What does Gabriel clearly say the vision is about? It's the time of the end. So why do we struggle so much? Because then he goes and tells us something that's going to happen in 5 years, the Medo-Persians. Something in 200 years, the Grecian Medo-Persians. Where do we switch from that to the end time? where in this whole thing does it change? Because I'm sure the Maccabean revolt was reading Daniel thinking they were at the end of the world. Because everything lines up, but then the world doesn't end. Interestingly enough, we'll talk about Alexander for a minute. I hated history in school, but when you read it as an adult, it's just different. Alexander the Great destroyed everywhere he went. I mean, he was brutal. He's making his way down towards Egypt, and he comes to Israel, and the high priest at the time, I can't remember his name, comes out and gives him the scroll of Daniel and reads it to him about the ram and the goat, Daniel chapter 8. And he is so impressed by the scripture, he does not destroy Jerusalem. He lets them be. And he has two opportunities, because he goes down and conquers, then he comes back up to go eastward, and he comes to Jerusalem again and leaves it alone. Now, everywhere else he went, he brought all the Grecian gods, all the Grecian faith, and all the Grecian language, but he left Jerusalem alone because of Daniel chapter 8. Now, I can guarantee you he didn't read him about the part where he dies at a young age and his kingdom gets divided. He probably stopped just before that. But he was so impressed, he left Jerusalem alone. There is a reason, and I don't remember exactly why. It had something to do with the Grecian Empire. They had something with a goat that tied them to it, kind of like Babylon with their lion everywhere, and Medo-Persia actually had rams, and the Grecian Empire had something to do with a goat too. But I can't remember what it was. But yeah, Gabriel tells him specifically this vision is about the time of the end. And he even says, his power shall be great, but not by his own power. So the Antichrist is going to be fueled by something other than his own power. Think of the book of Revelation. Who fuels the Antichrist? Lucifer himself. Empowers him. And Gabriel goes on to say, he's cunning. He'll destroy without warning. He will rise up against the Prince of Princes. Who's the Prince of Princes? We know now, Daniel did not. Yep. King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He rises up as being greater than the Prince of Princes. And he shall be broken, but not by human hands. Antiochus was broken by human hands. Through God's power, but by human hands. But which person gets destroyed? Not by human hands. The final Antichrist. So we have this, which is not uncommon in Scripture, dual fulfillment prophecies. You get a prequel of what's going to happen, and then you get the true fulfillment later. The one I go to is always, out of Egypt I called my son. That was first fulfilled in the Exodus. Out of Egypt he called his son. It was ultimately fulfilled in who? Jesus, because it's quoted in the New Testament that Jesus fulfilled it. Out of Egypt I've called my son. Because why did Jesus flee to Egypt? The king was trying to kill all the babies. And then when the king dies, he calls him back. So these dual fulfillment prophecies happen all the time. We get a prequel and then we'll get the final. So Antiochus Epiphanes is a prequel of what the Antichrist will look like. Guess where he comes from? Antiochus Epiphanes. The Middle East. So we're always trying to put it as a European Antichrist for some reason. Probably because we're so stuck on that it has to be Rome. It has to be Rome. It has to be Rome. I can be convinced it can be Rome. I don't think it's Rome. But there's enough evidence, I can argue back and forth. I was Rome for a long time before I went that the fourth kingdom is actually the Islamic Caliphate instead of the Roman. But even if it's Rome, it still has to come from the Middle East. It's not going to be British, Grecian. It's going to be Middle Eastern. Yes. Bold of face, I think, is. No, I think it's his actions. He's bold of face. So, uh, like him or hate him, take President Trump. I would say he's bold of face. If that man says, I'm going to do this, he just does it, which is odd anymore. Most politicians tell you all this stuff they're going to do and do absolutely none of it. And scary. And scary. So when you're bold of face, the scariest part is when you say something off the cuff, like men love to do when they get angry, then you have to back it up. So you say something stupid that you don't mean, and then you go and fulfill it just because you're bold of face, and you have to do it. That's what scares me about him. So that's the way I take bold of face. So I think he's going, if you read into Revelation, he talks, I think he's going to talk heavily on peace. The Antichrist. Because we're going to be a world in turmoil. And he's going to talk about peace, but he's not bringing peace. But he's going to put everything in motion so it looks like it and then bring destruction. So he's bold in his face. He talks about it, makes it look perfect, and then when we're not ready for it, he switches gears. Other questions? Got all the metals and animals figured out now? It is tricky. It's hard and nobody agrees. You get into preterist views and amillennialists and futurists and all different kinds of interpretations. Like I said, Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 8, I'd like to make all future, but I can't. But they're not acceptive of all. Yeah, they claim to be, but they're not. Yeah. Like, take Europe right now. I mean, they're losing their whole history to try to appease a foreign nation that has come into their land. They canceled all their Christmas things and because they didn't want to offend somebody else. So they're losing their whole history just to appease one group. Yeah, it's a hot mess. It's a hot mess everywhere. It's terrible anymore, but it's crazy. That's the key. So you are not a preterist, or there's one group that thinks the world's going to get so good and once it's perfect, Jesus will come back. It ain't happening. Questions? All right. Pops closes in prayer.